January 19th, 1970, Los Angeles, California. Janis Joplin is turning 27 years old tonight. She has just come off one of the most successful years of her life. Cheap Thrills went to #1. Rolling Stone put her on the cover. Time magazine, Newsweek.
Another
the
round,
whole country
please.
knows her name now. The name that nobody knew
Cheers
3 years
to the
ago
good
in
life.
Monterey.
All right.
She has performed to 400,000 people at Woodstock. She has been called the greatest white blues singer who ever lived. She has been called the female Bob Dylan, a comparison that made her laugh because Bob Dylan would never be called the male Janis Joplin. She is 27 years old, and she is one of the most famous musicians on the planet. And tonight, to celebrate, she walked into a bar on the Sunset Strip and did something that nobody expected. She bought a drink for every single person in the room. 200 people, strangers, every one of them. The bartender looked at her. She nodded once. That was all. The drinks came. The room erupted. People raised their glasses toward the wild-haired woman in the feather boa at the corner table. They cheered. They laughed. They toasted her birthday without knowing it was her birthday. And Janis Joplin sat alone in that corner and watched all of them celebrate. She didn't join a single table, didn't accept a single invitation, didn't move from that corner for the rest of the night. The bar owner would remember it for the rest of his life. She gave the whole room a party, and then she sat outside of it. To understand why, you have to go back to the birthdays that came before. Port Arthur, Texas, January 19th. Every year the same morning, the same house, the same flat Texas sky outside the window, the same smell of the Gulf coming in from the east. Janis's birthdays in Port Arthur were not celebrations. They were just another day in a town that had decided she was wrong. Wrong face, wrong voice, wrong everything. No friends calling, no friends coming over. Because there were no friends. There was a girl in Port Arthur who painted and wrote poetry and sang Bessie Smith songs into the dark Texas sky at night. And that girl ate her birthday cake with her family and went back upstairs and put a record on and let the music fill the room until the day was over. She didn't spend those birthdays feeling sorry for herself. She spent them making a promise. 20 years from now, none of this will matter. 20 years from now, I'll be somewhere that isn't here. I'll have a room full of people who know my name. I will fill rooms. That's what I'll do. I will fill every room I walk into. She kept that promise. She filled every room she ever walked into. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, is that there's a difference between filling a room and belonging in one. Port Arthur taught her to fill rooms. Nobody ever taught her to stay. 3 years before this birthday, Janis Joplin was nobody. Not a struggling artist, not an almost famous musician, nobody. A name in small print at the bottom of a festival program, an afternoon slot at Monterey, one song. Then 4 minutes happened. 4 minutes of ball and chain in the California afternoon sun, and 7,000 people who didn't know her name couldn't move. And after those 4 minutes, everything accelerated. Cheap Thrills, 1968, #1 for 8 weeks. Piece of My Heart. A song that sounded like Janis had reached inside her own chest and handed you something still warm and still beating. And with every sold-out show, with every standing ovation, with every magazine cover, a gap opened. A gap between the woman on the stage and the woman who went back to the hotel room afterward. The stage, Janis could fill any room. The hotel room, Janis sat in the same corner she always sat in. They love the voice. They love what happens when the lights are on. But the lights go off at some point. The lights always go off. And then there's just the room. The room is always just the room. And then January 19th, 1970 arrived. She woke up alone in her house on Larkspur Lane in Marin County, 27 years old. She lay in bed for a while. The house was quiet. Nobody had called yet. The California morning light came through the curtains and sat on the floor without asking for anything. She thought about Port Arthur. She always thought about Port Arthur on her birthday. 27. I made it to 27. Bessie Smith died at 43. 27 is just a number with a window and a January sky. That evening she drove to a bar on the Sunset Strip. She didn't call anyone, didn't arrange anything, didn't tell anyone it was her birthday. She just got in the car and drove toward the city the way she had always driven toward things, alone and at night and with the window down. She sat at the corner table and ordered a drink. She sat there for maybe 20 minutes, just watching. She had been watching rooms her whole life, measuring them, figuring out how to fill them. Then she called the bartender over. "How many people are in here tonight?" 200, maybe a little more. Janis nodded. "Buy them all a drink. Whatever they're having. Put it on my tab." The bartender stared at her. "All of them?" "All of them." The drinks came, and the room erupted. 200 strangers discovering that their drinks had been paid for. The bartender pointing to the corner table. 200 faces turning toward her. They cheered, they raised their glasses, and Janis Joplin raised her glass back, and smiled, and stayed in her corner. People came to her table. She was warm with every single one of them. She asked their names. She listened. She laughed at the right moments, and every single one of them left after a few minutes. Not because she was cold, because something in her made it gently clear that the warmth was real, but the door was closed. 7 people sat down across from her that night. 7 people left. The empty chair was never empty for long. It was never occupied either. This is what I wanted, a room full of people, all of them here because of me. This is what I promised that window in Port Arthur. I kept the promise. I don't understand why it feels exactly the same as before. Around midnight, the bar owner brought her a drink on the house and sat down across from her. "You doing all right?" Janis looked at him. The real look, not the performance. "It's my birthday," she said. He stared at her. "Your birthday? Why didn't you say something? We would have." "I know," she said. "That's why I didn't say something." He picked up his glass. She picked up hers. The bar roared around them. "Happy birthday," he said finally. "Thank you, Eddie," she said, and she gave him the real smile. He told this story for decades, not because it was sad, because it was the most honest thing he ever saw a famous person do. She gave the whole room a party and sat outside it. She could give everything to everyone. She just couldn't keep any of it for herself. But here is what almost nobody understood. Janis Joplin was not lonely because nobody wanted her. She was lonely because she didn't know how to let anyone stay. Port Arthur had taught her something that Monterey couldn't undo, that a #1 album couldn't undo. It had taught her that love was conditional, that the safest thing was to give everything first, to give so much, so loudly, so completely, that nobody could say you hadn't tried. Buy everyone in the bar a drink, fill every room, put everything you have into every note, give them all of it before they can ask, and then sit in the corner and keep the door closed, because if you never fully let anyone in, nobody can fully leave. 27 years old, I have everything I told that window I would have, the room, the people, the name, and I am sitting in the same corner I always sat in. I just paid more for the drinks. 9 months after this birthday, Janis Joplin would be gone. Pearl, the best work of her life, would be released 4 months after her death. Me and Bobby McGee would go to #1. The world would finally hear everything she had been trying to say. But the room would be full. She would be outside it. The same as always. The same as Port Arthur. The same as tonight. On her 27th birthday, in a bar on the Sunset Strip, surrounded by 200 strangers she had just bought drinks for, Janis Joplin sat in her corner. She smiled at Eddie. She raised her glass, and nobody knew it was her birthday. Janis Joplin bought every stranger in that bar a drink. She was the only one who sat alone, not because nobody wanted her there, because she didn't know how to be there and stay at the same time. Port Arthur teaches you things that success cannot undo. Being told you are too much teaches you to give everything before anyone can take it back. Being the girl nobody chose teaches you to keep the door closed even when you want it open. Janis knew how to fill a room. She never learned how to stay in one. Is there someone in your life right now who keeps giving and never takes? Who buys everyone a drink and sits in the corner? Who is warm with everyone and close with no one? Because that person learned something early that they are still paying for. And sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one asking most quietly to be heard. Janis Joplin asked for 27 years, through every song, every night, every room she filled. We heard the voice. We didn't always hear the question. This channel exists for the stories that never made headlines. Subscribe. The next one goes somewhere nobody has taken you before.